It is Thursday, November 10th, 2011. This is another edition of Infowars Nightly News. Thank you for joining us. We've got former sheriff's deputy and expert on the Constitution, very successful as a pro se litigant against tyranny, joining us in studio later. And, of course, Eddie Craig. And before we get to that, after we cover some of the news, we're going to get into the horrible scandal really illustrating the corruption of powerful institutions and their predisposed, preset system of covering up horrible crimes. That is coming up as well. So, again, we'll look at the Penn State pedophile ring that is beginning to come into view, and we'll also talk with Eddie Craig about the growing police state and ways to counter it in studio coming up. He'll be with us in studio. But first, I want to get into Iran. 3 weeks ago, I told you that Israel wants to attack Iran and has gotten the green light from the U.S. government. But they still have to prepare the public for a scenario that many experts have said could lead to World War III. They first tried to claim that a used car salesman was going to attack the Saudi embassy in D.C. That turned out to be a fraud. Now they've released IAEA reports saying that Iran is studying different types of nuclear power that 100-plus countries are studying, but that it could be used for weapons, so they deserve to be bombed into the Stone Age for that as well. And now the Daily Mail and others are reporting, in Parliament, they've actually testified that Israel may launch strike on Iran as soon as next month to prevent development of nuclear weapons. Of course, it came out that the Israeli government and think tanks are basically manipulating the British media. So I don't know what that information is worth. We heard from our government that Iraq had fissile material for nuclear weapons and was weeks away from an atomic bomb and had to be invaded because of yellow cake from Niger. And, of course, that was a premeditated lie as well. But it's an incredible distraction in Israel for Benjamin Netanyahu, and it's also a great distraction for Obama, both men in trouble with their upcoming re-elections. And the Israeli papers are saying that's why this attack may happen, despite the fact that all the attempts at frame-ups have failed, is because the politicians need it as a good distraction. Also, it's been pointed out that roughly 70% of Persians or Iranians don't like their government, and that attacking, every major political scientist agrees, attacking Iran will only put the mullahs back in a position of popularity and will make the public unify around their leaders. So this is bad at every level for the people, but it's good for the establishment. It's good for thugs in Iran and thugs here in the United States, England, and Israel. Continuing, getting into economic news, Eurozone debt crisis is spiraling out of control, but it is under control. I've told you for 4 years this expanding global derivatives crisis is impossible to pay back. It is a black hole that mathematically cannot be paid back. And we don't owe this money. Over 90% of it in the U.S., Iceland, Ireland, England, Greece. Now it's spread to a country with roughly 50 times the debt of Greece. They're reporting Italy. But it's not debt. The banksters, the Madoff, Ken Lay types, have gotten the governments and the finance ministers who were their alumni, work for them, literally, in every case, to sign on to the fraudulent debt. And now, reportedly, Germany and France have begun talks to break up the Eurozone amid fears that Italy will be too big to rescue. Of course, they already got their $1.4 trillion, which is leveraged to $5 trillion for the private banksters, and are just creating a mega IMF World Bank system to now bankrupt and suck out the sustenance and the substance and the exsanguination of the individual countries, and the Vatican's calling for world government and global currencies. But if you talk about it, the ADL comes out and says you're evil. Oh, look, the Vatican calls for world government. Shut up. That's code for racism. But I don't want to be under a world government. North American Union documents, they're merging us. Shut up. It doesn't exist. couple years ago, hey, the government's shipping guns into Mexico. Shut up. I don't care if it's federal documents. Now it's big national news, and they'll probably give CBS a Pulitzer Prize for it when we broke it 6 years ago and then again 2 years ago. But whatever. They're legends in their own minds more and more. And there's another report here, how Britain helped stabilize Europe for the past 66 years, and it just gets into all the taxpayer money sucked out of the U.S. and England, pumped into Europe. And enough is enough. I mean, Ron Paul wants to shut down our bases. Why do we have bases in Germany? Why do we have bases in all these other European countries? And then our military, quote, protects them. I'm tired of paying for it. You're talking about $1 trillion a year right there. Shut the bases down. This country has nuclear weapons. No one's messing with us unless our own system attacks us as a pretext to get us all hyped up like a swarm of bees to go out and attack their enemy. Our country doesn't exist anymore. It's been taken over by corporate fraudsters, but it was done through fraud. So as soon as we wake up to it, just like the Europeans are, the nightmare ends. As soon as you wake up to the fact it's a fraud and that it's a scam, you don't have to be under their authority anymore. It's universal law. God-given rights, whatever you want to call it, organic law. I'm not your slave. I don't have to pay taxes for derivatives that banksters created. Now, continuing with some very interesting news, Natural News reports, and they have links to all the mainstream articles on this, Baxter, the same company that produced deadly vaccines that killed ferrets in the test, the same company that unleashed tainted avian flu vaccines has recalled 300,000 flu vaccines for serious adverse reactions. And, I see these recalls every few months by big companies, but then I see national news going, there's conspiracy theorists that say there's been recalls and health problems, on and on and on with this bull. And then I've got all the Canadian and British studies and European studies that show that 3 years ago, the H1N1 shot doubled your chances of getting the next year's flu. It actually destroys your immune system. And then they admitted that, 1.6% of the time do they actually predict the next year's flu with the shot? I mean, this is beyond worthless. You notice cancer rates have basically tripled in the last 30 years in the United States. We have the highest rate of every cancer you can list. And then every other country, according to how many vaccines they take, is right in line. And the more GMO you've got, the more pesticide you've got, the more cancer you have. I mean, cancer is like getting a cold now. Alzheimer's is connected. Just search the term, Alzheimer's connected to shots. If a senior's had 3 or more flu shots within a decade, it doubles their chances of Alzheimer's. Hell, even the BBC admits that. And by the way, that's on all the inserts. But the nightly news never tells you because half their sponsors are Big Pharma. So that's an interesting report. Continuing, there's an article at Infowars.com. Gardasil victims take legal action against Merck over miscarriage and deadly reactions, including deaths. But they knew they had a deadly vaccine 4 years ago in the trials. After the deaths in the trials and all the adverse reactions and the Guillain-Barré and the narcolepsy and the rest of it, and remember, 2% of adverse reactions get reported. Look at that number. It's massively bigger than that, and that's huge. They then went to Rick Perry, the one political whore they could find, because if a state governor says, I'm putting on the list of recommended, he lied and said it was the law. That hoax got exposed. Then that triggers federal vaccine protection of liability, and then the government has to secretly, in the vaccine damage fund, pay it out to the families. They don't let it go to court because the federal courts have been turned into a joke, but still, so you don't go postal on them, they quietly just pay out taxpayer money. God, billions a year here. Oh, sorry, your kid's dead. Oh, sorry, the brain damage here. Here's just cash, 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 cash. So the vaccine makers go, this stuff's killing people. Well, we'll just have government recommend it, and then that kicks in, because it's mandated, that kicks in vaccine protection. So it's a wonderful scam. But people are now suing over this. Unfortunately, because Perry triggered government mandate, it'll now give them vaccine protection, and taxpayers will pay for all the dead and maimed children, and all the dead babies, and all the miscarriages, and all the other relish that the globalists enjoy. I mean, this is all part of their sacrament. But it's okay. I have a little thing I want to show you here. We get this type of stuff in the mail all the time. And driving around town, I just see signs everywhere saying, get your flu shot. I mean, I've gone to get a prescription for one of my children who had an eye infection. The woman wouldn't shut up about how I needed a flu shot, and we'll come to your office and give you shots. We got flu shot parties. And I said to the pharmacist or pharmacist assistants, I said, you got a computer over there? I said, type in flu shot vaccine doubles your chances of getting the next year's flu. It lowers your immunity. Or you know, you're a pharmacist assistant. Have you read the insert? I mean, I don't want narcolepsy. I just, you know, plus it doesn't ever really protect you. They never guess the right flu. I mean, I believe in inoculation. I know it's a real science, 400 years old, but it always causes its own set of problems. And I go, are you aware that polio programs worldwide have caused more polio than actually would have naturally occurred? I type in children given polio from the shots. They just go, oh, sir, move on, move on. And then shut up and give me the damn eye drop antibiotic, okay? I don't need to be lectured by you, a dumbass. Okay, I live the real documents. Sorry. Here we have the flu care, Texas Plus HMO. I mean, you with these HMOs can barely get basic dental care or whatever you need with many of these companies. I don't know about this company. They may be great. But the point is they're pushing, oh, here's your card. We want you to go out and get it because they get all sorts of government money, many of these insurance companies, for doing this. Why are they pushing it on you? Why is Mexico getting U.S. and World Bank and HMO funding and World Health Organization funding to inject 3 shots that's over $800 of Gardasil of every Mexican girl in Mexico? I'll tell you why. Because when you read the studies, this stuff also reduces fertility. Oh, but you're not going to hear that from Mecha and La Raza and all these groups because they're bought and paid for by the big banks. They'll tell you all day, fly Mexican flag, blah, 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 so you feel like the group supports you. But at the end of the day, they're not supporting you with somebody shooting you up with something that'll sterilize your ass. Excuse me, I know it's a family show. I apologize. Look into it. Find out. Now they want to inject all American boys. They've already hurt and maimed and God knows done what with 18 million American girls. Now they're moving on to other people. Folks, how many times has the UN been caught adding sterilants to vaccines? Many times. We've shown it here. The Rockefeller Foundation documents we've shown about sterilizing people through the vaccines. Wake up. Wake up. In fact, people won't believe it. I know we're going to Penn State scandal in a minute, but minimize that. Type in flu shots, Alzheimer's. And they'll tell you 3 flu shots in a decade doubles the chance of Alzheimer's. You can look it up, CNN, you name it. There's been major studies done on it, and it just makes me angry that they admit the flu shot doesn't even ever accurately predict what it's going to mutate into the next year, and then it doesn't protect you, and these companies are given total liability protection by the government, and so there's all sorts of additives and toxins and bacteria and viruses in it. I mean, folks, you need to research this. I've got 3 children. And I did a lot of research, even though I already knew this 10 years ago when we had our first child, to make sure before I didn't vaccinate him I was right. And it was overwhelming how bad the evidence. And in the 10 years, more and more comes out. I'm sure if we had really ethical companies and they did proper research and weren't given liability protection, there's probably something to vaccines and giving people artificial immunity. But it's connected to then increasing cancer when you don't let your body fight things itself. But the fact we got a bunch of eugenicists calling for population control and openly saying use vaccines to control us and reduce our fertility, and then you catch them doing it. I mean, this is a government shooting black men up with syphilis for 50 years. I mean, these people can't be trusted. It's very simple. It's kind of like a milkman's delivering milk to your house in the 50s, and you're like, well, why don't you trust the milkman? Well, if they had a spree of people putting cyanide in the milk being delivered, crazy milkmen, you'd say it's not that I'm against milk, but these are crazy milkmen. I mean, see what I'm saying? I mean, this is just common sense here. Okay, I want to get into this report because it was a U.S. News and World Report article today. U.S. tourism lost decade cost 500,000 jobs.